Hello and welcome to yet another video. This is the third episode of the story in which Naruto is adopted at a young age. How far can he go if someone actually supports him? How will he influence the elemental nations? This story is from a writing bunny. Please support him, her. Please like and subscribe to show your support. Let's get the show started. The strange white-haired ninja in a long shirt moved slowly closer. Naruto had hoped he'd never encounter common mission mishap number 6, a superior shinobi where there shouldn't be any. He went through his list of options. Fighting was out of the question, he was outnumbered and his opponent appeared to be out of his league. The same went for running. He was trapped inside a house and he doubted he could outrun the older man anyway. That left only trying to talk his way out of it. Wait, that's a misunderstanding. He lifted his arms in a defensive gesture. I didn't lead anybody here, I really wanted to hear about your offer. My team is nasty to me and... You lie, the enemy shinobi simply stated. You implicated us, so you all have to be eliminated. He lifted his arm and struck the closest target. Dato fell to the ground without a sound. He couldn't comprehend why he wasn't being praised for recruiting a real ninja. The owner of the house soon followed. He simply couldn't believe what was happening. They both sported identical expressions of stunned disbelief on their faces. By that time Naruto had his sword out and charged with wind chakra. He slashed at the still approaching man. The pale shinobi dodged the blade, but a red line still appeared on his clothes. He looked at it as if not comprehending how it happened. Naruto couldn't resist a small smirk. That heavy smoking jounin who once told him that few people expect a blade of wind was obviously right. He had foregone further gloating and pressed his attack. This time his enemy was prepared. He avoided Naruto's attack widely and caught the small blonde's wrists in his hand. He squeezed hard, causing the genin to drop his weapon, and yanked him off the ground. Naruto suddenly came face to face with his annoyed adversary. He didn't even think about his next course of action. He screamed. The stream of wind chakra hit the pale stranger right in the face. He dropped his captive with an ear-piercing shriek and covered his head with his arms. Naruto dove for his ninjato, intent on finishing the job. Before he could make 2 steps his downed opponent moved. Naruto rushed in, but something struck him in the stomach and threw him into the wall. He struggled to catch his breath. The stranger rose to his feet. Blood was covering his face and shoulders, but he didn't appear to be wounded. Naruto could swear he saw a strange pattern dancing over his skin, but it soon disappeared. It seems I'll have to take you seriously after all, the man stated. Naruto's response was another slicing scream, this time with more power behind it. In the enclosed area it had a devastating effect. The walls cracked. Dust was blown into the air and obscured both combatants' vision. A rumbling could barely be heard over the howling of the wind. Then the roof fell. Naruto barely had the time to throw his arms overhead, before a couple of wooden planks slammed into him. He should be very thankful for whoever had built such a shoddy house, but he had no time to think about such matters. The ninja shaking dust from his hair was a more pressing concern. He quickly put his hands into a cross-like sign and summoned a bunch of shadow clones and sent them to attack. He didn't wait for the result of their charge. He turned on his heel and ran for his life. He never liked turning his back on a battle, but he wasn't a fan of dying either. And there was a huge chance he'll die here, if he cannot escape. He was heading into the town, hoping that the stranger wouldn't want to fight in front of so many witnesses, but he wouldn't put too much money on that. His best chance of survival was in finding his team, namely Tenzo. Too bad they weren't following him closely, but nobody had expected the fish to take the bait so early in the game. The memories of dispersed clones reached him. That was quick. They haven't bought him more than 10 seconds. At least they were able to tell him something about his opponent's abilities. He was fast and precise in his attacks and used some blades protruding from his sleeves. They seemed odd to him, but there was no time to ponder over it. He created another batch of clones and sent them to cover his back. The clones quickly moved into formation and prepared to fire their most powerful jutsu at the same time. The enemy appeared around the corner. Futon, Great Breakthrough, Futon, Slicing Blast and Katon, Enden sailed towards the approaching man. Naruto was barely able to perform his only fire technique, but the flames were fanned by the wind techniques into formidable size and temperature. The stranger had just enough time to look surprised before the flames enveloped him. Unfortunately, the techniques couldn't rage for long. Naruto still didn't have sufficient control over them and the blast ended up hitting some of his own creators. The firestorm died down. The few doppelgangers who survived were treated to the sight of their opponents encased in some kind of grayish protective cocoon. This didn't work. The thought ran through all their minds immediately, followed by "we're screwed." They prepared for another attack. The stranger's cocoon slowly started retreating into his body. "What in the world is that?" the clones wondered. "I see that you are intrigued by my ability," the white-haired man said, slowly making his way toward them. "You see, I can control my bones. I can make them grow at will and withdraw them from any part of my body." To prove his words, he pulled one from his upper arm. It had the shape of a short sword. The clones watched in fascination as the gnawing wound on his shoulder closed. The enemy shinobi walked yet closer. One of the replicas shook off his stupor and charged at him. His ninjato was easily blocked. "Did I mention that I can control the density of my bones as well? This is harder than steel," the pale ninja continued his monologue. The clone attacked again and once again he was easily blocked. But he forced the enemy to turn his attention away from his fellow doppelgangers. In the absence of a better plan, they tried another combo ninjutsu attack. Their target, however, noticed it coming and jumped out of the way. One of his arms was signed, but he didn't sustain any considerable damage. He simply seemed pissed. Bone spikes sprouted from his arm joints, then he disappeared in a blur. The clones were quickly dispersed. The bone user stood and looked around. He only now noticed that the original wasn't there. He retracted the bones into his body, then gave pursuit. Downtown Yugo Naruto was running like his life depended on it. Correction, his life actually depended on it. He had created another bunch of shadow clones and had them spread out. He had to locate his team quickly or he would be done for. So far he had no luck. He threw a glance over his shoulder. Nothing. He could just hope that it meant his enemy was pursuing one of his doppelgangers or even gave up altogether, not that he was about to spring from behind the nearest corner and cut him into 1,000 little pieces before he could say oops. A rush of memories suddenly assaulted him. One of his clones had been struck down. Where was it? Far enough, but his enemy was fast. He could find him soon. Naruto had thought he couldn't run faster, but he somehow managed. He felt another clone dispersing. Where was Tenzo? He noticed a gray body. One of Hana's dogs. He changed his course, then realized it was just some random street mutt that didn't even look much like an Inuzuka ninja dog. He suppressed the urge to scream in frustration. He had to spare his breath. 2 more of his clones met their end. Then he realized something. There was a flash of purple before the last clone dispersed. Hataru. He didn't waste even a fraction of a second considering what he should do. It didn't matter anymore that the enemy was stronger. His teammate was in danger. He headed towards them. With Hataru she had little warning. One moment she was just walking the street looking for anything significant for their mission, the next there was her young teammate running at top speed. Then another ninja appeared and cut him down with a strange-looking blade. She unsheathed her own. Naruto dispersed into smoke. A shadow clone, she recognized. Next came the realization that she was now facing alone against an obviously superior shinobi. A string of curses ran through her mind. She was in a bad situation. What few people were out in the street started running away. She was suddenly alone with only her sword between herself and the enemy. The kodachi in her hands suddenly looked utterly insignificant. She was reminded of her Chunin exams match. Something was telling her that this duel will probably end in just as swift and brutal manner. Unless it would be even swifter and more brutal. Her breath caught in her throat. She had trained so hard, improved so much, yet it seemed like it was all for nothing. She felt utterly defeated and the battle hadn't even started. She shook her head. She had to get a grip of herself. Such thoughts would only get her killed. She assumed her beginning stance. The enemy shinobi strode towards her at a leisurely pace. It just strengthened her belief that she was outclassed here. But she was determined not to go down without a fight. She adjusted her grip on the handle. The stranger walked closer. She didn't dare to attack him, but she feared that if she let him have the first strike, she wouldn't be able to block it. The decision was taken from her. A flash of movement and she instinctively moved. The odd whitish weapon slid along her blade. Her leg shot out, connecting with her opponent's flank. He didn't even flinch, but her foot felt like she just kicked a hard rock. She jumped back and disengaged. He turned towards her and moved in for an attack. She dodged by a hair's breadth. She stabbed with her sword but hit only thin air. A blow struck her side and threw her into a nearby flower yard. She scrambled to her legs. Strangely enough, her opponent allowed her to do so. Yet another sign how he disregarded her skill. She felt insulted even though it meant she would get to live a while longer. She hated being underestimated, even when it was deserved. She charged her sword with chakra, trying to turn it into her lightning element. She partially succeeded. She let out a battle cry and charged. Desperation lent her strength. With a burst of speed she managed to reach her opponent before he could think about dodging. He just blocked with his forearm. The lightning made him jerk, but her blade barely broke his skin. It was even worse than she had thought. Another fist to her ribs brought her out of her musings. She once again found herself in the flowers. This time she had no time to get back up. Her enemy was upon her, his blade poised to strike. Her own sword was lying discarded in the dirt. She could just close her eyes and wait for the blow to come. It never did. She heard a crack followed by a thud. She opened her eyes hesitantly. The pale man was sprawled on the ground. A few feet away was Naruto just getting to his feet, one hand reaching for his ninjato. She had a brief flashback to their team test and Naruto saving her from the wooden figurine. She had never felt so relieved to see him. Naruto was functioning on pure adrenaline. When he saw the pale man just about to kill Hotaru, he just tackled him. He was lucky and managed to blindside the pale man, but now he was going to need all his skills and cunning to pull through. And it might still not be enough. "It seems I won't have to search the town for you after all," the enemy ninja said. "It's just convenient for me." The blonde didn't bother to answer, instead just pushed chakra to his blade. Then he charged with his ninjato, supporting it with a slicing scream. The white-haired shinobi moved away, but he lost one of his long sleeves. Then Naruto had to dodge a strike to his back. Hotaru used the brief respite to form hand seals. Raitun, lightning blast. A bolt of electricity launched from her hand. The target avoided it. Naruto let out another slicing scream. The white-haired ninja was a bit off balance from his teammate's attack and he managed to hit. Red lines appeared all over the gray-clad man's body, but unfortunately none of the gashes were more than skin deep. The blonde boy created a bunch of shadow clones. His opponent just scowled at them. White spikes grew from his hands. Half of the clones transformed into perfect copies of the purple-haired kunoichi. They started running around and mingling together. The original grabbed Hataru's hand and tried to get away in the confusion. "I won't fall for the same trick twice," the enemy shinobi stated calmly, methodically destroying the doppelgangers. It took him even less time than the last time. The two would-be escapees had barely time to round the corner. They skidded to an abrupt halt when the stranger appeared in front of them, his bone blades at the ready. "Now it's time to end the game," he declared, "I'm getting bored of it." Before he could make his words reality, Gray Furry Tornado attacked him. He jumped to avoid the Tsuga when another two closed in on him. He twisted his body in the air to prevent a direct hit when a fourth one slammed into him. "Hana!" Naruto exclaimed relieved. The pale ninja crashed into a nearby house. The four whirlwinds stopped, revealing the Inuzuka girl and her three canine partners. "In trouble again, Tiny," she said. "Quit your joking, he's good," the youngest teammate informed her. As if to prove his words, the downed ninja got up, his injuries gone, his skin covered in strange geometrical pattern. "What's that?" the dog mistress asked, her eyes widening. "Not a clue," Naruto shouted. "It seems like I will have to take you seriously after all," the enemy said. Bone blades sprouted from every joint. "Time to step it up," Hana decided. "Let's see how he'll handle this." Inuzuka style, so too row. Chakra swirled around her and one of her dogs. The opponent tried to prevent her completing the jutsu, but both Naruto and Hataru jumped in front of him, their swords charged with their elemental chakra. Hana's jutsu was finished. In her place now stood a huge double-headed wolf. The pale ninja's eyes widened in surprise. "Garuga!" snarled the beast and turned into a furry tornado. It charged forward at much greater speed than the Tsuga had. He had no time to dodge, he could only brace himself for the impact. The attack slammed him into the house, shattering the walls and coming through on the other side. The two remaining dogs ran to aid their mistress. Naruto and Hataru followed. Hana and her dog separated and got to their feet. They looked at their opponent and gasped. Where they had fully expected a mangled corpse, was instead a living monster. They couldn't describe it any other way. It somewhat resembled the ninja they had been facing, but it had brown skin, sinister yellow eyes and bone spikes protruding from its back. There was even a long spiky tail. "What the hell?" Hana stammered. She summed up the thoughts of the entire team quite nicely. Then the monster rose to its feet and the team took a step back like one man, and two women. The abomination reached behind its back and pulled something out. It looked like some kind of chain whip. They mutually decided not to think about what it actually was. "What now?" Hataru whispered. They all had already fired their strongest attacks and that thing didn't seem to be even wounded. "Buy time," Naruto suggested. As he saw it, their best chance was still to wait until their sensei arrived and hope that their adversary wasn't stronger than the jounin. He didn't even want to think about what would happen if that wasn't the case. The monstrosity readied his whip for an attack. Naruto let out another slicing scream. It barely had any effect. The brown thing just continued its charge. The three genin scattered. They weren't fast enough. The whip caught Hataru in the side. Blood sprayed out. The kunoichi fell to her knees and screamed. Hana saw another teammate being cut down by an enemy. She let out a battle cry and prepared to charge. Naruto beat her to it. He shot forward and slammed into the enemy. The thing actually stumbled back, unprepared for such a vicious assault. The boy pressed his advantage. He struck the now brown-skinned man in the face. It felt like punching a rock, but he paid it no heed. A familiar red heat was rising inside him. Usually it would scare him, but now he welcomed it, along with the power accompanying it. That abomination in front of him had hurt his teammate. It had to pay. The strange ninja got over his surprise and threw the feral boy off him. Naruto just flipped in the air and landed on his feet. He charged again, all finesse forgotten. He attacked with his bare fists, intent on inflicting a lot of harm. A voice in the back of his mind cheered him on. The monster counterattacked. The blonde boy evaded the dangerously sharp spikes without really thinking about it. He just knew they were there even though he could see only about a half of them. He punched his enemy again. He noticed that his fingernails changed into claws, but he wasn't surprised. Somehow it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Another of his strikes was blocked by a shield of bones. Naruto snarled in anger. He put more chakra into his fist. It was enveloped in a red glow. The strange ninja's eyes widened for a split second. But he was an experienced fighter and reacted on instinct. He threw the now red-eyed boy off him before the hit could connect. The Jinchuriki bared his teeth in rage. The two kunoichi were staring in amazement and fear at the battle taking place in front of them. First the strange pale ninja turned into some brown monstrosity, then their young teammate was enveloped in a sinister red aura, his appearance changing like if he used the Inuzuka beast imitation. He also improved in both strength and speed. They both itched to aid their comrade, but the enemy left no openings. The creature with bone spikes swung its whip to Naruto. The genin ducked low, then tried to claw the thing's stomach. He was swiped away by his opponent's left arm. He jumped high and tried to get in a kick. The whip headed for him and he barely got his forearms up in time to prevent a hit to his face. His trajectory was changed and he landed on the street. He rolled to avoid a kick, but a bone suddenly sprouted from the monster's ankle and caught him in the shoulder. He howled in pain. He swiped at his enemy, but he was too far to hit. But the red chakra enveloping him formed a claw extending further than his arm's reach and connected with the enemy's stomach. Four deep gashes appeared in the brown skin and red blood flowed out. The monstrous shinobi looked at them in surprise, as if he had trouble believing what had just happened to him. But soon his face hardened. Then it melted into surprise again, as he was hit by a tsuga from behind. Hana noticed his moment of distraction and capitalized on it. The spiked monster fell, but he sported only a flesh wound. He swung his grayish claw at the dog mistress. It was too fast to dodge. The Inuzuka could just lift her arm in an attempt to block. Before the hit could land, Naruto rejoined the fray. He grabbed the spiked arm, halting its descent towards Hana. His shoulder still hurt, but he could already feel the muscle mending. The chakra surrounding him burned the brown skin. The enemy struck with a speed unseen before. The blonde barely had the time to move before the whitish spikes pierced his side. He avoided a lethal hit, but the wound was serious nevertheless. He would have roared, but his ribs hurt too much for that. He struck the offending appendage instead, intent on ripping it off the unnatural body. The red chakra around his hand intensified, gaining the jagged edges of wind element. His swipe connected with the elbow. There was a sickening snap. He didn't manage to sever the arm, but the sinew and bones were mangled. He yanked the now useless limb from his chest. He tried to attack again, but his body was instead racked by sickening cough. Blood flew from his mouth. A crack of lightning resounded. Hataru saw her opening and swung her sword at the damaged elbow. The chakra-laced blade cut deep. The appendage now hung only on a thin patch of skin. The monstrous ninja screamed in rage and disbelief. Then he exploded in a flurry of motion. The threesome suddenly found themselves on the receiving end of a veritable storm of whip strikes. Hataru was thrown backwards with a deep gash across her ribs. Hana was flung into the wall of a nearby house by a vicious kick to her stomach. One of her dogs was lying on the ground whining, having been hit by the spiked tail. Naruto tried to attack, but a heavy hit forced him back to his knees. Then the whip was stopped by a tree suddenly sprouting from the ground. Before the brown warrior could blink in surprise, a sword hit the back of his neck. His ultra-dense bones stopped the hit, but he was thrown off balance. Before he could regain it, he was bound by rapidly growing tree branches. He barely had the time to create a bone shield before a stab pierced his skin. He immediately started growing blades to cut down the tree, but new branches quickly replaced those he managed to cut. It was a struggle of endurance. But it was 4 people and 3 dogs against 1. While he was preoccupied with Tenzo, Naruto scrambled to his feet and grabbed his sword. The red haze was now gone from his mind and he could think clearly once again. He held his blade in a one-handed grip, his left shoulder not being completely healed yet, and charged it with wind chakra. His injuries were bothering him, but he was able to move, though with difficulty. He swung with all his might. The blade cut deep, the sharp wind chakra cutting even through the reinforced material of the bone wielder's spine. With the spinal cord severed, his legs sagged bonelessly. Naruto sunk to the ground as well. His strength left him with the Kyuubi's chakra. He barely had the energy left to crawl away from the battle zone. The spiked monstrosity opened its mouth in disbelief of what had just occurred. It was unthinkable that somebody would actually be able to cut through his bone armor in his second stage. But it wasn't a tragedy, his accelerated healing would take care of his severed spine soon. But for the moment he couldn't MVE his lower body and his enemies saw it. The Mokuton user wasn't one to let such opportunity pass unexploited. The point of his katana was aimed precisely. The tip entered between the parted lips and pierced through the palate. The bone wielder had reinforced all the bones near the surface of his body, but forgot about those on the inside. The blade entered his brain. Even his regeneration wasn't able to deal with that. The Konoha shinobi watched in amazement as the beast started changing again. First the skin lost its brown color, a strange pattern appearing instead. Then even that slowly receded, revealing the surprised pale face of the young ninja. Only the bone appendages remained still attached to the corpse being held upright by the tree. The squad just watched in silence, clutching their wounds, not quite believing that the nightmarish battle was really over. Tenzo cut the throat of the defeated ninja for good measure. The stranger didn't even twitch, no geyser of blood flowed from his jugular. He was indeed dead. What the hell was that? Hana summarized the thoughts of all squad members. I don't know, their sensei replied. Can you tell me what led to this? But first take care of your wounds. Hana nodded, realizing she was the team's medic, and went to work. Later Hana sagged with tiredness. She had patched the team up the best she could and was proud to declare that nobody would die of their wounds. Unfortunately they were in no shape to continue the mission. I wouldn't have allowed you to continue anyway, the former ANBU said. We already encountered an A-rank enemy and he didn't seem like the boss. Naruto couldn't decide between feeling disappointed and relieved. On one hand he didn't want to abandon a mission that so far had been mainly his show, on the other he really didn't want to face such a monster again. He would never admit it, but he was secretly glad for the order to retreat. The townspeople dared to come out of their hiding holes after the street was quiet for long enough. The owner of the destroyed house was in tears, demanding compensation for his demolished dwelling. The 3 genin tried to blame it on the dead ninja, but it did them little good. It seemed like they would have to pay for it anyway. Then the mayor appeared and wanted to know what had happened. They gave him a brief report. I didn't call you here to ruin my town, the official lamented. We didn't come here to fight an A-ranked opponent, Tenzo countered. Such things sometimes happen. I hope you'll at least solve the mystery, he said. Rest assured that Konoha will do everything to find out where did he come from, the Mokuton wielder pointed to the corpse still supported by the trees. I'll hold you to your word, the mayor promised. I know, the Jounin confirmed. We'll now go and bring reinforcements. The three genin breathed a collective sigh of relief. They couldn't wait to leave Yugo behind. "I think it's time for some explanations," Hana declared when they settled for the night. It was a long journey back to Konoha. Their injuries prevented them from running, and even walking caused them a lot of pain. They haven't moved so slowly before unless they were escorting a caravan. Naruto visibly shrunk under his teammate's gaze. His side was hurting badly, even his enhanced healing couldn't take care of that much damage in such a short time. "I understand that everyone has their own secrets," continued the Inuzuka, "but there should also be trust between teammates." The young blonde just stared desperately at the ground, wishing a solution of this situation miraculously appeared there. But alas, nothing happened. The ground stayed just as it was, brown, muddy and covered in dried leaves. Seeing his discomfort, the girl mellowed. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, just remember, you can always trust your teammates." "I know," answered the boy weakly, but didn't add anything else. "You know what," the kunoichi sighed, when her youngest teammate stayed stubbornly silent, "you don't have to tell me now. I'll be listening whenever you are ready." "Thank you," Naruto whispered. "You're welcome," the dog mistress replied. Outward she appeared calm, but inside her curiosity was churning. Just what was her teammate's secret? That red chakra seemed now more familiar than ever, but she still couldn't pinpoint where she had encountered it before. Well, she just had to wait. She sighed. Patience was never her forte. Back in Konoha the squad felt immensely relieved when they came within sight of the gates of Konoha. Tenzo sent the three genin to the hospital, and went on to give a report. The Sandaime looked gravely when he finished. "Are you positive about that?" "Not really," the former ANBU replied, "but it's the only thing it remotely resembled. It can of course be something else, but it just reminded me of what I saw of Mitorashi's curse seal." "I see," the Hokage nodded solemnly. "And you couldn't bring the body back?" "Unfortunately no," the wood user answered. "All the genin were wounded and neither of us is a fuinjutsu expert. We tried to seal it into a scroll, but we botched something and damaged the body instead. We brought the scroll, but I doubt anybody would be able to get anything out of it." "We have to try anyway," the elderly village leader decided. "If you are correct, it would probably cause a lot of trouble for us. You are dismissed now." Tenzo bowed and left the room. Only after the door closed after him, allowed the Hokage the worry he felt to show on his face. He stuffed his pipe with tobacco and lit it with a bit of fire chakra. He sorely needed its comfort right now. The dots were beginning to connect. If there really was a new shinobi village in the making and if Orochimaru was behind it, things could turn very ugly anytime. He'll have to send Jiraiya to investigate. Konoha Hospital. Naruto was declared healthy almost as soon as the doctor looked at him. It didn't surprise him. His injuries have completely healed during the second day of their trip back. He wanted to make sure his teammates were alright, but the nurses wouldn't allow him, claiming they were still in surgery. This worried the boy a bit, but he tried to convince himself it was just the hospital staff being mean to him and not the two kunoichi being hurt that badly. They managed to walk all the way from Yugo to Konoha after all. Having nothing to do, he decided to go eat some ramen. It never failed to improve his mood. It worked its magic even today as well. After the second bowl he was already chatting happily with Tucci and Ayam. Feeling much better after the food, he wandered to the tree hideout. There was still a lot on his mind, but now he could think about it with a more positive outlook. He had used the Kyuubi's power in front of his teammates. He could make up some excuse, but it would only work for so long. Especially Hana seemed to be catching on it. Sooner or later, he'll have to come clean. He wanted to believe that his teammates would understand, but he could never shake the icy feeling of fear that they might abandon him or hate him like most of the villagers. He decided it would be better if he told them. Before they found out from someone else, but his courage left him every time he thought about doing so. He resolved to do something about it, just not right now. Somewhere in rice-field country Jiraiya was sitting at the bar, drinking and ogling the young ladies, pretending to be interested solely in their assets. In fact, he was keeping an ear on every snippet of conversation going on around him. He had hoped to learn some new information here, but so far he had no luck. People around him were chatting only about inconsequential little things, just like in the last establishment and the one before that. He had been deeply rattled when he had first heard about little Naruto's fight against the Kaguya with the curse seal. He didn't even want to think about what could have happened had his team not intervened. He was half mad at his sensei for assigning the child such a dangerous mission, but he understood that such things sometimes happened and it was upon people like him to make sure they didn't occur too often. The old guilt came back again. If he just could have done something about Orochimaru, if he could have prevented his friend from leaving, if he managed to keep better track on his traitorous teammate. The list went on and on. The snake Sannin was somewhere out there, gathering powerful subordinates, conducting who knows how sick experiments, and he was powerless to do anything about it. Heck, he didn't even have a clue where to find him. He waved at the pretty barmaid to pour him another cup of sake. Wallowing in guilt never accomplished anything. He leaned against the bar comfortably, straining his ears to catch every bit of gossip. Maybe tonight he would get lucky and learn what that snake was up to. 2 weeks later both girls were finally released from the hospital, but couldn't resume their training in earnest yet. Naruto decided it was as good time as any to come out with the truth. He was still anxious, downright scared, about their possible reactions, but he couldn't keep pretending much longer. They would find out sooner or later anyway, and it would be better if it was from him. So one sunny afternoon they all gathered on their regular training grounds, all of them waiting to hear what the youngest team member had to say. I don't know where to start," Naruto said nervously. "Try the beginning," Hana suggested. "Yes, crap, this is hard." He had prepared a whole speech beforehand, but suddenly couldn't bring himself to actually recite it. "We have whole afternoon," Hataru remarked. "There's no need to rush. If you need more time." "No, that's fine," the blonde refused. "I have to say it now or I'll never gather the courage again." "Naruto is actually scared of something," the Inuzuka raised an eyebrow. "That must be a first." The boy just scowled at her. "Don't make fun of him, Hana," Tenzo chastised her. "It's hard enough as it is." "Okay, I'm quiet now," she backed off. "So what is it?" Naruto took a deep breath and started speaking. Hana listened to his tale in silence. Yes, everything about the enigmatic boy suddenly made sense. The first time he mentioned the Kyuubi, something in her head clicked. She remembered where she had encountered the oppressive chakra she had felt in the Grey Mist Mountains and later when they were fighting the bone monster before. She had been barely 5 years old when the nine-tailed demon attacked, but it was an event that had engraved itself deep into her mind before she managed to bury it within the deepest recesses of her memory. Now everything was coming back to the forefront. 8 years ago, Mama, the 5-year-old girl with red triangle marks on her cheeks cried. She was desperately running around her clan's compound, searching for her parents. She didn't even try to deny she was scared, even though big Inuzuka girls should be brave. There was a feeling of dread and doom in the air, and the night sky on the horizon was tinted red, like a great fire was burning there. Her clansmen were running back and forth, gathering their battle gear. The big and usually so strong and confident hounds were covering in corners and whining. It was a scene of utter chaos. "Mama! There are you!" cried the girl, relieved upon seeing her mother. Sum was standing among a large group of Inuzuka ninja, giving them some last-minute orders. "Hana! What are you doing here?" The older woman looked afraid. The child paused. She had never seen her mother like that. She was always the embodiment of strength to her. "You should go to the shelters." But I want to stay with you. Hana put on a show of bravado she didn't quite feel. You can't, pup, her mother answered. We're going to fight. I can fight too, she proudly declared. She had gotten a set of practice kunai for her last birthday and could now hit a tree from 20 steps away. I'm a big girl now. Honey, Tsum knelt in front of her, listen to me. This isn't a battle you can fight. But I'll give you a mission. Okay? The girl nodded enthusiastically. The woman smiled. Protect your brother, Hana. He's just a baby. Take him to the shelters. Understand? Yes, she confirmed. Good girl, her mother ruffled her hair. Remember, I will always love you. And now go. With those words, Tsum got up and returned to the group of shinobi she had been commanding. Hana headed back inside the compound and picked baby Kiba from his crib. He was heavy, but she was a strong Inuzuka and could handle his weight. She left the clan compound and ran to the streets towards the Hokage monument where the shelters were. Everywhere around here were people rushing back and forth, civilians panicking, ninja heading for battle. She could have smelled their fear even if she hadn't been an Inuzuka. Her mother's parting words kept replaying in her head. Mommy doesn't expect to come back. That thought scared her more than anything in her young life. Back in the present, Hana guessed they had been lucky. Both her parents had come back that day, wounded and exhausted, but alive. Many others hadn't been so fortunate. She couldn't remember the exact number of clansmen who had died that day, but she knew there were many. And others came back crippled. They up to this day wobbled around the compound on wooden legs or had to do everything with just one hand. Yes, the destruction had been terrible. Hearing that the monster responsible was still around was just plain scary. Yet she couldn't reconcile the image of the fearsome beast with her young, sometimes funny, sometimes annoying teammate. Only during the battle in Yugo. Hataru was also remembering. She hadn't been in Konoha when it happened. Her parents had taken her on a trip to visit their relatives scattered around the Fire Country, but she had seen the resulting destruction and heard a lot of tales. She couldn't even fathom what kind of power the demon held. Hearing that it was sealed within the kid beside her was just surreal. I don't think I fully get it yet, she said. Yes, wrapping my mind around it is quite hard, Hana agreed. You aren't going to hate me then? Naruto peeped hopefully. I don't know what to say, Hataru replied. Ask me in a week or so. She got up and left. Hana remained sitting. Naruto watched her anxiously waiting for her to speak. The girl was meanwhile lost in thoughts. The fear of the demon, the hate she held towards the one who hurt her clan so badly and pack instincts and protectiveness over her teammate along with budding friendship were waging war inside her heart. It promised to be a long and drawn-out battle. I think, she said when the silence lasted for too long, I'll take a page from Hataru's book and take some time to think it over. It was quite a bombshell you just dropped. But you aren't going to hate me, are you? The boy demanded with his impossibly wide blue eyes. She sighed. Even an Inuzuka wasn't completely immune against the dreaded puppy dog eyes, no matter how much practice she had resisting them. No, brat, I'm not going to hate you. Later that week it had been a tense couple of days since Naruto's confession. The team started meeting again, not for physical training, the two kunoichi still needed more time to recuperate, but for planning and strategy sessions. Those were awkward occasions. There was something that everybody both wanted to speak of and desired to avoid. It was looming over them, yet they were desperately trying to ignore its presence. Hataru was the first one to address the issue. What is it like? She asked. What? Naruto turned startled blue eyes towards her. I asked what is it like to have that thing inside you, she elaborated. Or is it an insensitive question? No, not at all, he shook his head. Most of the time it's quiet, I don't even know about it. Sometimes, when I'm in danger or angry, I can feel its power. And what is that like? Hotaru inquired further. Hot. And burning, he replied. And scary. No kidding, the purple-haired girl muttered. Do you fear me? The blonde asked. No, she answered. Looking at you, you're just a little shrimp. Hey! Naruto protested. I'm still scared of the power within you, she continued, but as long as you don't use it in front of me, it should be fine. That's good, the boy smiled for the first time in a week. Several weeks later it took a long time before the wounded members of Team Tenzo were declared fit for duty. They quickly slipped into their old routine of training and D-ranks. Their sensei also informed them that they were eligible for the next Chunin exams in Suna and started preparing them for prolonged stay in the desert. Everybody was excited about it, but they couldn't help but feel a bit apprehensive. Suna exams tended to be tough. They knew the main problem would be water. Naruto took extra lessons with Kanu, trying to figure out a way to store large reserves of the liquid in an easily accessible way. They also decided to test their newly acquired skills with another C-rank mission. Tenzaku Gai protecting Lady Mao was the worst assignment they've ever got. Seriously. Even when they had to fight the Bone Freak, it hadn't been that bad. That woman insisted that she didn't need protection, nobody would want to harm her and they really didn't need to stick so close to her. She used every possible opportunity to give them a slip, but the noses of Haimaru's siblings couldn't be fooled, even though she made a valiant attempt to destroy their sense of smell with her perfume. All three genin had catastrophic scenarios running through their minds. The mock missions equipped them with a vast knowledge of what could possibly go wrong with such client. Any passerby might be an assassin who would pluck a poisoned senbon into her without them noticing. A kunai might come flying from anywhere piercing her richly decorated neck. A roof tile might fall on her head. She might run under a speeding cart while trying to ditch them. She might fall out a window attempting to give them a slip. The list went on and on. Even when they had to guard Anko during their training, it wasn't quite like this. All three genin wished something happened to break the torturous routine. Why are we even escorting her? Naruto whispered. It's not like anyone would miss that shrew. We're getting paid for it, Hotaru whispered back. They were alone with the client now. Tenzo and Hana were resting, scheduled to take the evening shift. Not nearly enough, the blonde retorted. Why do we have to be here when she doesn't want us to? Her husband hired us, the purple-haired girl reminded him. I still don't understand why. In my humble opinion he would be better off without her. It wasn't that Lady Mao was an unattractive woman, quite the contrary, but she possessed a shrill voice and mean demeanor, quickly antagonizing everybody within her vicinity. Team Tenzo started hating her after she dubbed them the brat, the bitch and the wench within 5 minutes of meeting each other. She only solidified the feeling after she ordered the bitch to keep her fleabags away from her. The Inuzuka foursome had to be forcibly restrained from biting her. Maybe he wants to make sure she can't meet her lover, the Uzuki suggested. You mean somebody would actually want to spend time with her even when he doesn't have to? Naruto looked at her dubiously. Men are weird, Hotaru shrugged. Hey, I'm a man too, Naruto reminded her offended. You're just a little brat, the older girl replied. Lady Mao is rubbing off on you, the short blonde commented. No, you're just annoying me, the kunoichi corrected. I'm not that bad, am I? Naruto pouted. Do I really have to answer that? Their conversation was halted by their charge's next attempt at giving them a slip. They both had to hurry to keep up with her before she could disappear in the midday crowd. The high-born woman gave them an evil eye before pretending she was just interested in something at the nearest stall. Naruto personally had no idea what she could find so fascinating about gardening tools. Somebody with such long fingernails couldn't have possibly touched work in her whole life. Lady Mao seemed to realize that as well, and in a slow and dignified manner moved to the next stall, that one selling vegetables. She wasn't the kind of woman to cook for herself either, so she moved even further on. She passed several more vendors before she noticed a door that seemed to be of interest for her. She entered without hesitation. The casino was full of life inside, though not as busy as the streets outside. It was obviously a high-class establishment and Lady Mao fit there perfectly. They couldn't say the same for themselves, their clothes being made more for practical use than looking good. They just tried to look tough instead, though it was an uneasy task, being just short of 9 and 13 respectively. The noblewoman passed between the tables with various games of chance before settling down to one that caught her fancy. Or maybe it was just the handsome bookmaker who caught her fancy, judging from the way she batted her eyelashes at him. She started gambling and losing money steadily. It was no wonder, she didn't pay much attention to the game. It changed when her money reserves thinned and she demanded they would help her and spy on the other players' cards. They flat out refused. Naruto claimed it wasn't in their contract. The real reason was he wouldn't do anything Lady Mao asked from him because she pissed him off too much. She then offered to pay them for it. Hataru pointed out that the casino had people watching out for cheaters and they would get caught. Some kind of ninja you are, the woman scoffed. Just stupid brats playing at being tough. Naruto wished somebody tried to assassinate the lady that moment, so he could show her just how tough he was. Or maybe he wouldn't, one failed mission wasn't too bad if it meant he would never have to see that person again. The people watching the casino would be ninja too, Hataru explained, and specialists at detecting cheaters. It just pays off for the owners to hire the best. You don't want to know what they do to the culprits, she trailed off with a well-executed shudder. If Mao paled at the words, it was impossible to tell under all that makeup. But if you want your money back, the kunoichi continued, over there is a lady who seems to be losing even worse than you are. Lady Mao shot her an offended glare, but looked the pointed way. Surely there was a beautiful young woman with long blonde hair and chest of impossible proportions scowling at the ever-dwindling pile of chips in front of her. The other patrons around the table were trembling with barely restrained excitement. They looked like it was a given the woman would lose. Lady Mao stood up and walked there. She wanted to sit at the table, but all the seats were taken and long queues formed behind them. Let me in there, Lady Mao said in a commanding tone, trying to push to the table. Get back, lady, I was here first, one of the patrons said in a no-nonsense tone. How rude, the noblewoman scowled. Don't you know who I am? No, the man answered flatly, turning his attention back to the game. I let you know, I am. Lady, he interrupted her, even if you were the daimyo's wife, I wouldn't let you pass. So now please get back in the line. You. Lady Mao probably turned red, but the makeup hid that as well. Boy, she turned to Naruto, remove this person from my way. The man's eyes widened. That's not in my contract, the blonde answered flatly. It was hard to hide his mirth, but he managed. Impudent whelp, you do as I say. Her beautiful face was twisted in rage. It is not in my contract, he repeated. Listen, brat, the money is important, so you'd better. Excuse me, lady, but could you please tone your argument down? A new voice entered the conversation. And you are? Mao scowled at the newcomer. It was a young, pretty, black-haired woman in dark clothing. I am Shizun, she introduced herself. My lady told me to ask you to quiet down, she cannot concentrate on the game. And I care why. Lady Mao was angry and she wanted everybody to feel it. My mistress possesses both short temper and very strong fists, the dark-haired woman explained. She has no problem using them when somebody angers her greatly. I don't care. I have bodyguards. Their client for the first time looked absolutely assured of their competence. A genin team, I see, Shizen observed. They would do you no good against Tsunade-sama. Tsunade as in the Tsunade? Naruto's eyes widened in impossible size. His eyes strayed towards the woman currently betting most of her remaining chips. Yes, that's her, the young woman confirmed. Wow, he exclaimed. You make it sound like she was a big deal, Lady Mao scoffed. You mean you never heard about Tsunade? Hotaru asked incredulously. No, and don't be rude, wench. Hotaru gritted her teeth. Shizen shot her a sympathetic look. Do you think we can talk to her? Naruto asked. I advise against it, the dark-haired woman said. She doesn't want to see anybody from Konoha. Too bad, the boy grimaced. It's not every day you meet a legend. You don't know what is it like meeting her every day, Shizen laughed. I don't even know your name, boy. And how are things back in Konoha? I am Uzumaki Naruto and this is Yuzuki Hotaru. Konoha is still standing, beside that, I'm probably not supposed to tell. Fair enough, Tsunade's assistant laughed. I'm pleased to meet you too. Don't be chatting with strangers when you are supposed to be protecting me, Lady Mao interrupted. She was angry that Hotaru foiled her attempt to slip away while Naruto was preoccupied. Yes. Lady Mao, he uttered. We're leaving, brat, the noblewoman ordered. We're leaving, Shizen, Tsunade entered the conversation. She had just lost the last of her chips and nobody around wanted to loan her more. She gave the Konoha shinobi an unfriendly glare. Naruto wanted to say something to her, but the look in her amber eyes stopped him. Sorry, guys, I have to go, the apprentice smiled apologetically. We too, Naruto said following Lady Mao. Can we meet again, he called. That depends on my lady, Shizen answered. Then the crowd separated them. They didn't get to see each other again, not for a long time to come. Tsunade and her assistant had skipped town during the night, whether she was running from debt collectors or bad memories was unknown to everyone but her. Team Tenzo endured one more week of torture under Lady Mao before finally returning to Konoha to their training and preparations for the exams. Before the exams the day before they were supposed to leave finally came. Everybody was at home packing their things, thinking about the upcoming event. Hotaru was alone in her home. Her cousin was away on a mission. Last time they had talked Yugugo had warned her about the dangers, but she wasn't overly concerned about it. She had entered a Chunin exam before and even though she didn't fare too well, she learned how the exams were done and she was sure she could take them with no trouble at all now she had gotten so much better. Really, it was going to be a breeze. Or that was what she was trying to convince herself. Sometimes her left forearm still hurt. Naruto and Tenzo were in their apartment going over the things they might need. First on their list of must-haves was water. Tenzo stressed the importance of good hydration in the arid climate of Wind Country almost every day and Naruto had spent many evenings with Konoha trying to find the best way to store large quantities of it in an easily accessible manner. They had consulted many scrolls before. They came up with a seal that could release water gradually, the only disadvantage was that the supply of liquid stored was limited. It was still better than bottles. Naruto had one backpack filled with sealing scrolls of that kind. The boy was excited, eager to try his strength against the best other villages had to offer. Tenzo himself didn't share the sentiment. He still wasn't convinced his team was ready, but Hokage's orders were Hokage's orders and there was nothing he could do about them. He had prepared his team the best he could and now he had to trust them to handle themselves. Hopefully they would survive in one piece. Suna exams were rumored to be extra tough. Hana was in her clan's compound trying to get her things in order with her little brother constantly getting underfoot. Hey, sis, what is that for? Kiba asked holding the object in question in his hands. Put it down, Hana shouted. That's my stash of ointments. If you break it, I'm going to skin you alive. Okay, the boy said, laying the box down carefully. Nothing happened, see? I see, the older girl nodded. That's your only luck. Next time don't even touch my things. So you are going to be Chunin, sis? He asked. If we do well, then yes, she answered. Is all your team going? He wanted to know. Of course, she nodded. Only complete squads may participate. So even that little one is going? The young Inuzuka inquired. Yes, his older sister confirmed. That's not fair, he complained. How comes he's going to be Chunin when I'm still at the academy? That's because he is training and studying so much, she explained. What about you, Kiba? Are you training and studying enough? Of course. He sounded offended. Really? She raised her eyebrow. Really, he nodded. You know me, sis. It's because I know you, little brother, she said with a stern face. I've heard quite a different story from your academy instructor. Ah, come on, sis, Kiba made a grimace. Irika-sensei is just so boring. And you think life is full of excitement? The younger Inuzuka's face betrayed that yes, that was indeed exactly what he thought. That is not so. There is a lot of hard work. If you want, come to watch us in the finals and see how good you need to get. Have I really said this? Hana startled. Now we'll have to get to the finals or I'll never hear the end of it. Okay, sis, I'll come, he smiled. I bet there would be no one as awesome as me. Ha, you wish, smirked the older girl. And could you now leave me alone? I'd like to finish packing sometime before midnight. Gates of Konoha. The teams leaving for Suna gathered near the village gates. 15 Konoha teams were trying their luck at the Chunin selection exams in the hidden sand village. Everybody was eyeing the competition, searching for familiar faces. And who do we have here? A mean voice sounded near them. Hana sighed and closed her eyes. That was one person she hoped to avoid, but it seemed she was out of luck. She slowly turned around. And good day to you too, Takiko, she said. There she was standing, the sister of her deceased teammate, looking too much like Takita. Only the expression in her gray eyes was different. Instead of Takita's usual serious or amused expression, her stormy orbs held only anger and hatred. The Inuzuka couldn't really fault her. She was blaming herself for his death even now. So you think you can make Chunin now? The newcomer asked, poison dripping from her voice. And who did you find as your new team? A little squirt and a seduction specialist? They won't save your neck in your fight. Who are you and why are you insulting Hana? Naruto asked hotly. None of your business, brat, Takiko replied. I'm talking to the bitch. Don't call my teammate a bitch, the blonde's eyes narrowed. Or what? She asked teasingly. Are you going to hit me? Don't make me laugh. I promise you won't be laughing when I'm through with you. Naruto, that's enough, Hana snapped. But she's insulting you, the boy protested. I can defend myself, she reminded him. Then why are you not? He pointed out. None of your business, she snapped. Aren't teammates supposed to trust each other? You're the one to talk, she barked. The young Jinchuriki recoiled as if struck. Sorry, Naruto, I didn't mean it, she apologized, but the damage was already done. You know, boy, Takiko rejoined the discussion, I pity you for having that poor excuse of a kunoichi as your teammate. The blonde didn't answer. Here, you are, Takiko, a new voice sounded. It came from a young genin in a gray coat. What do you want, Noriaki? The girl in question asked in not too friendly tone. Oboro-sensei wants the team together before we leave, he answered. I'm coming. She turned back to Team Tenzo. Don't think this is over, she said before disappearing in the crowd. Noriaki shot them a sympathetic glance and followed his teammate. Takiko decided to make the trip as uncomfortable for Hana as possible. She jibed and taunted the Inuzuka on every opportunity. Hana's patience was wearing thin. Fortunately, Oboro-sensei, an elderly woman who could have been long retired as a shinobi, but loved teaching genin too much, kept a tight watch on her so she didn't get to do it too often. She even threatened the girl with withdrawing her from the exams if she wouldn't control herself. That worked and she didn't bother them anymore. They crossed the fields and meadows of river country and entered the arid plains of wind country. The vegetation around them was thinning and thinning until it disappeared entirely. The endless dune sea took their collective breath away the first time they saw it. The trek through the desert felt far longer than it really was. The heat was beating down on the team mercilessly. Hotaru was the worst of. She had recently changed her outfit, her old kimono gone, replaced by something. That must have been inspired by Anko. She now wore a mesh bodysuit covering her from mid-thighs to mid-upper arms, her modesty being guarded only by a short dark purple top with a hood flowing freely on her back and a matching miniskirt with slits on both sides. The ensemble was completed by mesh guards of her elbows and knees and fingerless leather gloves. It offered very little protection against the sun, sand, and hot winds. Tenzo finally took pity on her and lent her an off-white traveling cloak. The girl accepted it gratefully. Otherwise nothing noteworthy happened during the trip. Finally, on the 5th day of their trip, they reached the entrance to the hidden sand. Looking at the narrow canyon, Naruto was unimpressed. Compared to the elegant gates of Konoha, this looked simple and run down. But when they emerged on the other side, he stopped in amazement. He never saw so many huge buildings together. Close your mouth before sand gets into your throat, Tiny, Hana advised, but even she was impressed. If you're finished, we should settle into the hotel, the Jounin interrupted. And have you already forgotten what I have told you about proper behavior while visiting other shinobi villages? No, sensei, the Inuzuka answered. Then abide by it, he ordered them. The team resumed their pace. The local inhabitants were shooting glances at them, some curious, others cold, some even hateful. Naruto wanted to ask about it, but decided to wait until they were alone. Then one of the onlookers caught his eyes. It was a young boy of maybe his age, maybe a bit older. He was standing alone on a busy street, the passers-by giving him a wide berth. Sand was swirling around him in directions defying the wind. His face was completely impassive, marked with a tattoo on his forehead. His dark-rimmed eyes were watching them from under red bangs with a strange expression. Naruto saw something in their depth, something disturbing and familiar. Before he could name it, his team moved forward and he lost sight of the strange boy. But there had been a feeling of understanding? Acknowledgement? Kinship even? He couldn't quite name it. But he was certain that he would be seeing the redhead again. Hotel. They settled into their assigned room. It was large and comfortable, though sparsely furnished. They didn't mind, they didn't bring many possessions with them. At least this room is nice, Hotaru commented, because the locals surely aren't. I barely noticed, Naruto replied. Their glares were quite obvious to me, Hana commented. It's a matter of getting used to it, the Jinchuriki shrugged. Sorry, the Inuzuka apologized. What's up with the locals anyway? It's not as much the villagers as their daimyo, who isn't alright, Tenzo explained. He cut the military expenses and Suna is suffering from it. They lost quite a lot of business to Konoha over the years. It's no wonder they're bitter about it. I think I've heard about it before, the Inuzuka clan heiress remarked. I didn't pay much attention to it then. What does it mean to us? The purple-haired girl inquired. Should we worry about them throwing stones at us? No, the Jounin answered. We are guests of the village. They guaranteed our safety. If they harmed us, they'd lose face and it would cost them even more lost business. Expect them to be rude and unhelpful, but not much more. Good, the blonde said. I really wanted to explore here. You might, but better not wander off alone, their sensei replied. You never know what might happen and this is an unknown territory for you. That's okay, Hataru shrugged. I wanted to explore as well. I wonder what fashion they have in sand, she added dreamily. I want to take a look around too, Hana added. It always pays off to know your surroundings. Then go and enjoy yourselves. Just don't stay up too late. Tomorrow early morning we're training. Streets of Sunagakure. Naruto strolled through the streets of Suna alone. They had first gone out as a team, but the girls soon took off on a shopping spree and he quickly lost interest. He now wandered aimlessly, admired the huge hive-like buildings, ignored the villagers' cold stares and thought about the earlier encounter. The boy he saw just after they entered the village was occupying the forefront of his mind. He wasn't sure how, but he was certain he recognized a kindred spirit in him. He wanted to meet him again, talk to him properly, but he had no idea where to find him. He had even no idea what his name was. He considered simply asking for a while, but decided against it. If the citizens here were anything like Konoha, they wouldn't be overly eager to help. He was almost ready to give up for the day when he nearly ran into him. For a moment they just stood there, eyeing each other curiously. Hello, Naruto broke the silence first. The other boy didn't answer. He just stood there motionlessly, sand swirling around him, the look in his eyes making the Konoha genin nervous. I saw you earlier today and I thought, the blonde trailed of under the redhead's unflinching gaze. He never saw such eyes before. They were so empty and lifeless, yet there was something hiding in their depths, something Naruto couldn't quite name. Was it pain? Loneliness? Want? Something completely different? He couldn't tell. He decided to try another approach. I'm Naruto, what's your name? Gaara, the other boy answered. Somehow it almost caused the foxy boy to jump. Well, pleased to meet you, Gaara, he tried to put on his best smile. It was giving him a lot of trouble today. The native youth didn't answer, nor a single muscle moved in his face, only the sand around him swirled faster. Two Suna citizens walked around the corner and upon seeing them they disappeared. Where did they come from? It was making Naruto very nervous, but he wasn't ready to give up yet. I noticed how everybody was avoiding you, he said. I know that. I thought that maybe we could be friends. Friends, the freaky child echoed in a strange tone before clutching his head in obvious pain. Naruto looked at him concernedly, his earlier fear forgotten. What happened? He fussed. Can I help? Gaara didn't answer. Instead he whispered something Naruto didn't catch over the rustle of the whirling sand. Its speed was steadily increasing. What did you say? The leaf genin inquired. Does it hurt? Should I take you to a doctor? I don't know where to find them here. Mother, the redhead whispered. Naruto looked around. He couldn't see any woman anywhere. In fact they were completely alone. Do you want your mother? The local boy stopped clutching his head and looked at him. His eyes changed. Instead of whatever it was that filled them before, they were now completely crazy. Naruto involuntarily took a step back. What's up with you? He asked alarmed. I'm going to kill you, Gaara said like he was talking about weather. Mother wants your blood. Naruto had no idea what was up with the redhead, but he could tell things were about to get ugly. He felt something stirring within himself, he could hear the faintest whisperings telling about blood, death and destruction. He forcibly pushed them from his consciousness. The sand was now gathering between them, reminding the blonde of a predator about to strike. He readied for defense. He felt something creeping up his feet. A glance told him it was sand. A sense of danger shot through him. He mustn't allow it to climb any higher. He jumped back. It's useless, Gaara announced. You can't hide from my sand. Just what is the matter with you? He asked. He didn't want to fight in a foreign village with a local citizen, but he would defend himself from an attack. By the way, what would happen if they fought? Shouldn't some local authority intervene? Where were they? It seemed that somewhere else. It was only the two of them on the otherwise deserted street. I'm going to kill you to prove my existence, the Suna child answered in that unemotional tone of his. That's crazy, Naruto observed. The only answer was a wall of sand rushing at him. The Konoha genin countered it with futon, great breakthrough. When the wind died down, he saw a protective cocoon of sand where the other boy was standing. The sand slowly crumbled away, revealing the impassive face of Gaara. Impressive, he said. Mother will love your blood. You will serve well to prove my existence. The blonde didn't answer. He realized words would get him nowhere. But what should he do? There was an obviously strong enemy wanting to kill him. He could try to run, but that sand-manipulating ability of his could probably stop him. Fight? He had no idea how that would turn out. He was only certain that fighting in a residential area of an allied village would land him in a world of trouble afterwards. And reasoning with a maniac was completely out of the question. The only viable option was retreat executed in such a manner that the deranged redhead wouldn't realize he was gone until he was safely out of his reach. A number of clones sprung into existence in front of him. Gaara watched them with a crazy glint in his eyes. More food for mother, he commented. The sand seemed to shake in excitement. The replicas rushed in for an attack and the sand rose to meet them. They crashed into an impenetrable wall and were destroyed shortly thereafter. The sand settled down to reveal only one blonde Konoha genin standing on the street frozen in fear. Gaara grinned manically. Sand rose once again, enveloping the other boy in a sand coffin. He took a moment to savor the fear in those blue eyes. Sand funeral, he said, squeezing his fist. The cocoon of sand tightened, crushing its prisoner. The blonde disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Gaara was startled. Did his prey just escape him? Rage filled his veins. Mother was talking to him, demanding blood. You will get his blood, mother, he answered. Just wait a little. I will definitely crush him. Then he smiled. Yes, he is strong. He will serve well to prove my existence. The Hotel Naruto moved in consecutive shunshin, yearning to put as much distance as he could between himself and the insane redhead. Why did he ever want to talk to him in the first place? How had he ever managed to convince himself there was a sense of kinship between them? He had never seen another such wacko in his whole life. And yet, before his eyes had filled with bloodlust, even after they did, there was something disturbingly familiar about them. He wanted to know what it was, but his common sense was telling him to keep away. He decided to listen to it this time. The memories he received from the last clone had been deeply disturbing. Despite what certain people thought, he wasn't suicidal. He opened the doors of their suite. Only Tenzo was there. Hello, he greeted his charge. Where are the girls? They went shopping, the genin answered. I didn't have the patience for that. Ah, Tenzo nodded sagely. Did you enjoy your trip? Sort of. Just sort of. The older man raised an eyebrow. Well, the blonde ran his hand through his hair nervously, all went well until I met that boy. What boy? The wood user inquired. Maybe you noticed him when we came to the village, Naruto explained. About my age, redhead, tattoo on his forehead, circles around his eyes, everybody avoided him. Yes, I noticed him, Tenzo nodded, but I didn't look at him too well. What happened? I nearly bumped into him on a street, the demon vessel said. He wasn't going to admit he was actively searching for him. I tried to talk to him, but then suddenly he went all crazy, I have no idea why. He started threatening me. In the end I had to run or he would really have tried to kill me. Was it really so? The Jounin asked seriously. Yes, the genin nodded. That's a serious offense, the man continued. Gravely. Are there any witnesses? No, the child shook his head, the street was deserted. 2 people passed by but quickly left, and that was before he started doing anything. It looked like they were scared off by his mere presence. That's not good, Tenzo grimaced. Now it's your word against his. We can't take any official action. Do you know who he is? He said his name was Gaara, the younger ninja answered. I'll ask around about him, the older man promised. In the meantime, don't go near him again. I won't. Naruto promised and actually meant it. I'm not that stupid. The next day Gaara walked the streets of Sunagakure at a steady pace. Around him crowds were parting and people scattering in fear. He could crush them with his sand in an instant and they knew it. It was just right they ran from him. On another day he could have stopped to scare them some more, but not today. Today he had another prey in mind. His mother spoke to him urgently. She wanted blood. Yes, he answered in his mind, you will get it. Just not right now. Most people wouldn't believe if they heard it, but Gaara was actually patient. It helped him savor a good kill. And this one would be good, he was certain of that. He had already shown his strength, despite running in the end. That was nothing new to Gaara. Everybody ran from him eventually. What was new was the feeling he got from him. Somehow it didn't seem like the blonde boy ran away out of fear. Naruto, he repeated his name. He was a strange one indeed, even his mother said so. He wasn't sure what made him so special, but it didn't matter. In the end, he would look just like anybody else when the sand would squeeze the life out of him. It wasn't a problem for him to find out where the Leaf Shinobi were staying for the exams. He stood behind the corner and watched the hotel entrance intently. People passed in and out, but they weren't of interest to him. Then the boy who dared to speak to him about friendship finally appeared. He was accompanied by what seemed to be his team, a male jounin, 2 kunoichi clearly older than him and 3 gray dogs. He followed them at a safe distance. They were headed for the training grounds. He watched them begin their training routines. Yes, Naruto, he thought, show me just how strong you are. Show me just how tasty a meal for mother your blood would make. Show me how well you can prove my existence. He settled down to wait and observe. Training grounds, that's enough for today, Tenzo announced. The team sighed in relief. The training had been tougher than ever, not because of the distance they had to run, number of push-ups and sit-ups and squats or intensity of their spars, but because of the unbearable heat, dry and dusty air and unrelenting sunrays trying to fry them alive. They never needed so many breaks to take a drink during a session before. But then the whole point of this exercise was to get them accustomed to local climate before the exams started. I can't wait to get back to the hotel, Hataru remarked. I just want to soak in a cold bath for hours. Too bad they don't have a bathtub here. Just what would you expect in the middle of a desert? Hana commented. She was kneeling next to her dogs, which were lying on the ground bonelessly, their tongues sticking far out of their mouths, their breathing fast and heavy. Poor Haimaru, they have it the worst out of us all. That's because they're wearing fur coats, Naruto said. It's not like they can help it, the Inuzuka replied. Not like us, she pointed to the pile of discarded clothes. Everybody who could get rid of a garment while keeping basic modesty had done so. They waited for a while to cool off before putting their clothes back on. Before they could head back to the hotel, a figure appeared near the edge of the training grounds. Gaara, Naruto recognized him instantly. The wacko you told us about yesterday? Hana asked. Yes, he confirmed. For a minute they just stood there, watching each other warily. Then the short redhead started slowly walking towards them. He stopped about 10 steps away, not saying a word. "Hello," Tenzo greeted him politely. The boy didn't outwardly react. It seemed he didn't even hear him. He was just staring at Naruto intently. "Hello, Gaara," the blonde said. "Naruto," the tattooed youth replied. "Would you prove my existence?" "What?" The shout came from Hotaru. "I'm not talking to you," the deranged youth stated calmly. "Why, you little," the girl narrowed her eyes. "Calm down, Hotaru," Naruto suggested. "He's rude," she replied. "Should I just let him get away with it?" "We're guests here," Tenzo reminded her. "We mustn't cause any trouble here." "It doesn't matter," Gaara said. "Mother wants his blood." "You have a strange mother if she drinks blood," Naruto couldn't stop himself from remarking. The boy in front of him still gave him the creeps, but with his whole team backing him he wasn't scared anymore. "Mother is mother," the Suna boy replied like it was the most obvious thing in the world. For him it probably was. "Figures," the blonde muttered. "Mother is interested in you," Gaara added. "She likes you. And yet she wants you to kill me?" Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Yes," the redhead nodded slightly. "What kind of twisted logic is this?" Naruto inquired. "I don't think there's any kind of logic," Hana commented. "I'm not talking to you," the insane child said. "Look boy," Tenzo intervened, "I don't know who you are or what do you want, but you shouldn't threaten my students. Understand?" "Shut up or I'll kill you," the local boy stated. "In fact, I think I'll kill you anyway. Mother always wants blood." "You shouldn't threaten guests of your village," the Jounin suggested. "It would get you in trouble." "I don't care," the psychotic youth answered flatly. "Mother wants your blood." "And where is your mother?" the Jounin asked. "Here." There was nobody close by. The Konoha team took it as another proof of his insanity. They all came to the realization that reasoning will get them nowhere. But what else could they do? It wasn't like they could just attack a member of the host village. If he attacked first, they could of course defend, but without unbiased witnesses, they could still get blamed for it. All in all, it was a very unpleasant situation. Before anything else could happen, a new person entered the area. It was a tall man in Suna Jounin uniform with fang-like marks on the half of his face that wasn't covered by a headcloth. "Gaara," he called. "Baki," the youth spoke. "What are you doing here?" "Gaara, what are you doing?" the man continued. "Your father would be angry with you if you kill any foreign shinobi." "I don't care." His voice left no doubt that he indeed didn't. "You are going to be in a lot of trouble when Kazekage-sama finds out you have been threatening our guests," Baki elaborated. "I don't care," the disturbed redhead repeated. "Neither about that nor about him." "Gaara," the Suna Jounin scowled, "stop it this instant and go home." The tattooed youth seemed to consider it for a moment. "I will kill you another day," he said and left. "I apologize for him," said Baki humbly. "He is wild and untamed and we can barely control him." "No kidding," Hotaru muttered. "Nothing happened," Tenzo replied, "yet. Can you please make sure he won't be bothering us again?" "I'll see to it," the Sand Shinobi promised. "I consider the matter settled then," the Konoha Jounin stated. "Thank you," Baki bowed. "I wish you to have a pleasant stay in Sunagakure." He then left to take care of his difficult charge. "What the heck was that?" Hotaru asked when he got out of sight. "I'm not sure," Tenzo replied, "but from now no wandering around alone." Kazekage's office. Gaara listened impassively as the man who dared call himself his father ranted and raved. He would have once cowered before his rage, but now it didn't even faze him anymore. He wasn't a scared little child, hadn't been for over 3 years now. Yashimaru had cured him of it thoroughly. He wondered idly, what would happen if he tried to kill the one lecturing him. Mother would sure like his blood. But he wasn't certain he could take on the Kazekage. That man was strong, he had earned the hat through his strength and accomplishments in the last great Shinobi War. Not yet, he decided. But once sure. Once he's older and stronger, he would crush him like the rat the man was. The leader of Sunagakure finally finished his rant. Gaara looked indifferent. He wasn't exactly bored, sleepless nights taught him how to deal with that, it would be better to say he was annoyed. It was always the same old song how Gaara was too wild and dangerous for his own village and how he should finally learn to behave. Then he was finally dismissed. Nobody detained him, they knew that trying to lock him up would do them little good. He wondered whether there would be another assassin tonight. He would welcome it. Mother was angry she was denied her meal today and the sacrifice would console her. He caught a movement out of the corner of his eye. Somebody jumped from roof to roof trying to remain unobserved. His outward expression remained unchanged, but inwardly he smiled. It looked like tonight's mother's snack was already on his way. He slowly returned home and waited. Training grounds they had heeded their sensei's warning, but it wasn't enough. When the pair of them stood on the abandoned plain alone with the murderous redhead, they realized how inadequate the safety measures had been. Hotaru had forgotten something after the training and he had volunteered to go with her to picket. That was when Gaara appeared again. They had trusted the Suna shinobi to handle him, but even that had proven foolish in the end. The psycho probably couldn't be controlled at all. So now they stood in the middle of a large sandy plateau that passed as training grounds in Suna, watching the sand swirl around the creepy boy, all too aware of every grain of sand lying under their feet and floating in the air around them. Not one person was in sight. They weren't expected to return soon. They couldn't count on outside help. Gaara slowly walked closer to them. A thought of running passed through their minds, but the crazy youth was between them and the village. They stood their ground, all the while feeling like rabbits watching an approaching wolf. "So, Naruto," Gaara started, "are you prepared to confirm my existence?" Sand whirled wildly around him. The blonde tried not to flinch. The empty green eyes caused him to feel chills even in the hot desert sun. He wanted just to bolt and run. Something in his mind growled. He recognized it as the Kyubi no Kitsune. It was the first time he took comfort from the demon. He had the power of the greatest of bijou sealed within him and partially accessible for his use. If worst came to worst, he could somehow use it, like in the fight with the bone monster. He suddenly felt much better. He was however aware that fighting a sand user in the desert put him at a disadvantage and wanted to avoid a battle for as long as possible. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Maybe if he could hold the conversation long enough, somebody would come. He just wasn't too sure what they would be able to accomplish. "To prove my existence," Gaara repeated. "You already said so." "How does it work?" the blonde inquired. "By killing you I confirm my existence." He said it like it made perfect sense. "I don't understand." "Everybody can see you exist." "I can see it, she can see it," he pointed to trembling Hotaru, "people in the village can see it, why do you need to kill somebody to prove it?" "Because I was created as a weapon," the redhead explained. "If I can't kill, my existence will disappear." Warning bells sounded in Naruto's mind. Could it be? After the old man had first explained him about the Kyubi, he had asked whether there were others like him. He had learned that indeed there were others, but not much was known about them. Every village kept such secrets under tight guard. He had sometimes wondered what it would be like to meet another of his kind. He had certainly never imagined somebody like Gaara. What had happened to him to make him that way? Could he have ended just like him? Enough, he told himself. He didn't even know whether the other boy was indeed a Jinchuriki, so any speculations were idle. "He is," sounded in his mind. It was so faint he barely heard it, but he could understand it perfectly. So the fox knew something? He guessed he shouldn't be surprised. He decided to continue his play for time and hope that the Ninetales would volunteer some more information, like what demon he was dealing with. "What kind of weapon you are?" he asked, even though he already knew the answer. Who knows, he might even learn something new. "When I was born, my father, the Kazekage, ordered a sand spirit, Shikaku, sealed into me." Gaara didn't know why he was telling the foreigners this. It did them no good, he would kill them anyway. Maybe it just felt good to talk to someone once in a while. And it wasn't like it mattered what he told them, they would be dead soon enough. He had the woman who gave birth to me killed in the process. He wanted me to be the strongest shinobi, the ultimate weapon to be unleashed at his enemies. But the war has ended. There were no enemies for me to crush. I became unnecessary. Dangerous, they said. They tried to forget I existed and why. My own father tried to get rid of me. Get rid of you? Naruto asked. Surely that couldn't mean. He sent the first assassin when I was 6, Gaara confirmed Naruto's worst suspicion. It was my uncle and caretaker Yashimaru. I killed him. Since then I killed everybody who came at me to confirm my existence. And now I'll kill you and that girl to confirm my existence further. The sand swirled faster. Forget it, said Naruto forcefully. Gaara just stood there, readying his sand for an attack. I will not allow you to kill either myself or Hataru, and I suggest you find another way of confirming your existence. Have you ever considered making friends? I could help. Naruto didn't know what reaction to expect from the psychotic youth, but it certainly wasn't the one he got. Just like during their first encounter, he started clutching his head and whispering about mother. Not good, realized the blonde. He's going to attack soon. Hataru, run, he whispered to his teammate. What? She looked at him uncomprehending. I can't leave you alone with him. You know what Sensei said. I know, and I know what we're dealing with. Just run, this is above your level. When she still didn't move, he added, please trust me and go. Something in his voice convinced her. She nodded and starting slowly backing away. You're going nowhere, Gaara suddenly roared. He wasn't clutching his head in pain anymore, instead he was grinning manically. Mother wants your blood. He threw his arm forward. Sand rose from the ground, trapping the retreating girl in its unyielding grip. Let her go, Naruto snarled. His veins were slowly filling with the familiar red heat. He didn't resist. If he really stood against another Jinchuriki, he would need the power. What if I don't? The Suna boy taunted. You don't want to find out, the blonde said threateningly. Show me, the tattooed youth said. He tightened his fist a bit. Hataru shrieked. Naruto saw red. Nobody gets away with threatening my friends. Friends? Gaara laughed. Friends are nothing, you fool. No, the Konoha Genin shook his head, you are the fool. Prove it. I'm going to. Naruto spared one glance for his captured teammate. She was in obvious pain, the sand slowly smothering her. He had to act quickly to save her. His hands flew through a sequence of seals. Futon, Detappa, was his technique of choice. Sand was picked up from the ground and thrown at the stationary redhead. A protective wall formed in front of him. Naruto's jutsu was however powered with a portion of Kyuubi's chakra and had a lot of strength. Most of the sand was blown away. Good, very good, Gaara cackled insanely. You'll serve well to confirm my existence. Mother can't wait to taste your blood. I told you to cut the crap already. The angry voice came from dozens or maybe even hundreds of identical throats. Gaara lowered his sand to gain a better view. Nearly a half of the training grounds were occupied by identical blonde ninja. The vessel of Shikaku grinned. This promised to be a lot of fun. The clones in the front row ran forward for an assault, their blades unsheathed and charged with wind chakra. He formed spikes of sand and sent them to intercept them. They were fast and agile, but none of them managed to reach him. What he didn't realize was that it never was their creator's intention. They served only as a distraction to hide the other clones' movements. That is why he was so startled when he noticed a dozen fireballs heading his way, their flames fanned by wind jutsus. His automatic defense enveloped him in a tight sphere of sand just before the flames reached monstrous proportions, entwining into a gigantic firestorm. Naruto had trained this combo since the first time he had used it, so it took a longer time before his clone started popping. Eventually the storm died down. A giant glass ball was revealed in the middle of the training grounds. The glass was still molten, slowly dripping on the equally molten ground. Then ripples appeared in its surface and then it started cracking like a monstrous egg. A scream sounded from it. Some of the liquid glass had dripped down on the boy inside and his automatic defense wasn't fast enough, mainly due to a significant lack of unmolten, unheated sand. For the first time in his 9 years, Gaara felt true physical pain. "What is it?" he whispered, befuddled. "That feeling. Is this pain? I'm hurt. Mother." Wah! Naruto was watching him curiously. His battle instincts screamed at him that now would be a good time to finish him off, but a rational part of his brain pointed out that killing a local Kage's son while visiting a foreign village is generally considered a major diplomatic faux pas, usually leading to war. So he stayed his hand, even though he had already a new bath of clones on position for another firestorm. He had no reason to kill the deranged boy anymore now that he was so startled. He let Hotaru go. "Run," he ordered his teammate, and she obeyed unquestioningly. She understood that she could do nothing here and the only way she could aid Naruto would be to summon help. She was still in pain and her legs wobbly, but she was putting all her effort into her retreat. "I'm going to kill you!" Gaara screamed. The last bits of sanity seemed to leave him, only madness apparent in his eyes. Sand picked up from the ground and attacked the clones. Naruto gave his command. Dozens of wind and fire techniques flew towards the deranged boy, who was once again enveloped by a protective cocoon of sand. This time it took him considerably longer to come out. When the sphere of glass finally cracked and fell off, it revealed the creature inside. It looked somewhat like Gaara, but there were major differences. Half of his face changed into a monstrous mask and one of his arms was replaced with a giant animal paw. As Naruto watched, even the rest of his body seemed to slowly change. "It's sand," he realized. "He's being covered with it. What does it mean for me?" Guessing from his expression, nothing good. He considered his options. He could try another firestorm, but all his clones had already popped and making new ones would cost him more chakra than Gaara needed to defend against the technique. It just wouldn't do to collapse unconscious in front of an insanely powerful homicidal enemy. He had to try something less energy-consuming. Let's see how he deals with a close-range attack. He drew his ninjato, let out a battle cry and charged in. He had expected the sand to try and grab his feet, but nothing like that happened. Gaara was allowing him to come close. Why? The blonde wondered. Does he want to deal with me close up and personally? Just how good is he at close range? He didn't get a lot of time to consider it. The monster, now covered more than halfway in sand, struck. He's slow, Naruto realized. He evaded the huge arm with no effort at all. He jumped up and kicked at the monster's head. Sand appeared in his path and stopped his foot. Okay, that didn't work, he thought. This was bad both for himself and Gaara. He didn't want to kill or maim the other boy, aiming rather just to knock him out, but now he would have to use potentially lethal force. He grimaced. What happens to the demon if one kills the Jinchuriki? He asked, hoping for an answer, but the nine-tailed furball stayed stubbornly silent. He landed on his feet and immediately sprung up again. Charging wind chakra into his blade, he struck at the partially sand-covered side of his opponent. Once again sand appeared in the path of his weapon, but the ultra-sharp blade was slicing through it. The sand was pressing at its sides, making a valiant effort to stop it. The sword was slowing down. The sand eventually managed to stop its progress, but not before the blade made a shallow cut near Gaara's ribs. The sand counterattacked and Naruto was forced to jump back to avoid the spikes. His ninjato had to be abandoned, he wasn't able to pry it out of its prison. "What is it?" asked Gaara, studying the red liquid flowing from his side. "Is that blood?" "My blood? Kaya. Mother. I'm bleeding." He acts like he was never harmed before, the Konoha genin observed in surprise. But then, with that sand defense of his, it is really hard to injure him. He didn't have the time to pursue the idea further. The sand around him sprang to life, enveloping him in a tight cocoon, slowly squeezing the life out of him. "I'm going to kill you." The Suna Jinchuriki screamed. "That's bad," Naruto thought. "I can't move." "Is that it?" "No." He felt the familiar burning of the Kyuubi's chakra spreading through his veins. It came with more intensity than ever before. It filled every last cell of his body and continued even further. The sand was pushed back from his body. "Show that impudent whelp what it means to mess with somebody who has 8 more tails," the demon growled in his mind. Naruto grinned. He had every intention to do just so. "What?" Gaara seemed befuddled that his sand coffin failed to work. When his sand was batted away and the blonde boy emerged shrouded in red chakra, an expression of panic briefly crossed his face before being replaced by a maniacal grin. "I see you're even stronger than I imagined. You'll serve well to confirm my existence." Naruto noticed that the redhead changed even further. Most of his body was now covered in sand, resembling some animal standing on its hind legs. He couldn't tell what it was, the sand swirling around wildly was obscuring his vision. "I'm gonna end your existence." The blonde shouted and ran forward. The sand tried to block his path, but he batted it away. Shikaku's power animating it couldn't stand in a direct confrontation with the Kyuubis. Gaara was roaring in rage and sending even more of his sand towards him. It was like going against a sandstorm, but Naruto wouldn't be stopped. He got close enough to the desert monster to strike. That brought him also within Gaara's striking distance, but the sand-covered child was slow. He easily evaded his crushing arm and buried his red chakra claws in the sand body. That's when he was hit from the side and sent flying. He struggled to regain his breath. Where did this come from? "Oh. Is that a tail?" Yes, Gaara had grown a tail sometime he wasn't looking. What did that mean? He didn't know. He wanted just to rush in and rip it off. No, he stopped himself. Think. Brute strength doesn't help here. He stopped for a moment and ran through hand seals. The sand tried to stop him, but the red chakra cloak didn't allow it to come close. Futon, de Tapa. Great wind picked up, blowing away the sand floating in the air and much of that lying on the ground. There was infinitely more underneath. Even the sand monster standing in the middle of it remained unmoved. Not enough, Naruto realized. Is that all you got? Gaara taunted. I'll squash you like a bug. You wish, replied the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. He created a clone for a combo attack, but the replica didn't have the protective red chakra around it and was destroyed before it could clasp its hands in a seal. Damn it, Naruto cursed, there goes my strongest attack. The sand creature, now looking like a miniature version of Shikaku, finally moved from his spot and attacked in a straight line. Naruto waited for the last possible moment before leaping sideways. The monster couldn't turn in time and ran right past him. Naruto grinned. He got now right behind its unprotected back. Well, not completely unprotected, there was still the tail, but the Konoha genin had no trouble avoiding it. With a burst of speed he landed on the creature's back and dug his claws into it. He couldn't get deep enough to reach the host's body, but the sand was melting under the Kyuubi's chakra. Now if he could keep it up for a while longer. He was forced to dodge a wildly swinging tail. He managed to keep his hold on Gaara's back, but he had to abandon his attack. He tried to resume it, but then the one-tail host started rolling on the ground and he had to retreat or be squashed. He stopped for a moment to consider his options. It seemed hurting Gaara directly was a tricky prospect. It wasn't completely impossible, but he probably wouldn't be able to land a debilitating blow. Turning this into a battle of endurance didn't seem like a good idea either. Even though he felt full of strength now, the red chakra was burning his body and he wasn't sure how long can he hold on to it. And was it just him or was the already overgrown sand tanuki slowly getting bigger? Option 1 it was then, he'd just have to come up with a more damaging attack. His mind wandered back to the fight with the bone freak. Back then he had managed to partially transform the red chakra into wind chakra and almost tear the monster's arm off. If he could pull it off again, it might just allow him to dig through the protective layer of sand before Gaara could shake him off. It wasn't easy, the red chakra resisted, being more suited for fire, but he managed. He resolved that the next thing he was learning was fire elemental recomposition. He let out a battle cry and charged. Once more sand obscured his path, but it wasn't able to stop him. The desert monster rushed to meet him. The giant arms flew forward trying to catch him. He ducked between them and got right in front of the now unprotected belly. He thrust forward his own arms, now surrounded in jagged red chakra. The sharpened claws dug deep into the sand. Gaara screamed. Success, thought Naruto before Gaara's sand arms struck his back. Ouch! He couldn't even cry aloud as the breath was forcibly squeezed out of him. He lost concentration and the wind chakra dispersed. I have to get out of here, was the thought ran through his mind. He wanted to do a kawarimi, but he couldn't see anything he could switch with. He couldn't see much of anything from his position. Pathetic, resounded within his mind. Damn the fuzzball, he thought. He somehow found the strength to push the monstrous arms a bit back and take a deep breath. Then he screamed. The chakra-laced air blown away a bit of the sand covering the Suna boy. It gave Naruto just the leverage he needed. He freed his arms from their prison and pushed up. The sand hands tried to grab him, but he somehow managed to slip through them. He jumped high. The Shikaku's tail hit him midair, but it failed to do any significant damage. He landed in a roll and quickly sprung to his feet. Damn, that was close. He took one look at his enemy and almost froze. Where once used to be a man-sized likeness of Shikaku, now the sand demon towered in all his glory, as big and tall as whole apartment complexes back in Konoha were. Not good, was the only thought present in his brain. If the battle was hard before, now it was going to be virtually impossible to land a hit on the deranged Jinchuriki. The layer of sand was now so thick he wouldn't be able to get through. He also seemed to gain more control of the sand and the red chakra cloak had more trouble repelling it. If there just wasn't so much sand everywhere. Ha 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 ha, Gaara laughed. Good, very good. Show me more of your strength. Prove my existence before I kill you. Not that crap again, Naruto rolled his eyes. Then a giant fist headed his way and he was forced to jump out of its path. He surveyed his surroundings. If he could just find something that would give him an edge, but the battleground was completely in favor of his opponent. If only. There. Yes, that might be his chance. Naruto smiled and took off at breakneck speed. Running already? Gaara taunted. That won't save you. He sent a wave of sand to intercept him, but Naruto leapt high, higher than ever before, and overcame it. Stop, you coward. Show me your true strength. The madman tried to call him back, but the Konoha genin just kept on running. The giant tanuki pursued him. With Hataru she was running as fast as her still unsteady legs carried her. Her ribs felt badly bruised and every breath was torture for her. Every part of her being just yearned to get away from the battle raging behind her as fast and as far as possible. She was worried for her young teammate, but she understood his warning. This battle was far above her level and she would only get underfoot or outright killed. She shot a glance to the sandstorm raging behind her. Is that the power of Bijou? She mused. It was terrifying. How big a portion of their strength is this? She wasn't sure she wanted to know. She just had to find Tenzo-sensei. He was supposed to be able to subdue their power. She knew his ability was limited in comparison with the Shodai's, but at least it was something. The first Hokage was told to have been able to command the Bijou like household pets. How powerful was Tenzo? She had no idea, but she had trouble comprehending how any human could be powerful enough to subdue such sheer force of nature. But if he couldn't, what would happen then? She didn't want to finish the idea. She concentrated on getting to their hotel as soon as she could. The plateau above Sunagakure Naruto didn't stop to take a breather when he climbed up the cliffs surrounding the hidden sand village, but he allowed himself a smile. It was just like he expected. Up here were rocks, stones, and boulders, but very little sand. The Ichibi host wouldn't have the advantage anymore. One glance over his shoulder told him that he had just enough time to prepare him a proper welcome. Gaara was past all rational thought. Bloodlust was clouding his mind. Bloodlust and pain. It was a new feeling for him and he decided he didn't like it. He was going to punish the one who made him feel it thoroughly. Shikaku was calling for his blood as well and giggling drunkenly. The demon was very close to breaking out. He jumped over the edge of the cliff and came into sight of his prey again. Boom, Naruto said, activating the exploding tags. He sacrificed most of his stash for the trap, but the result was spectacular. The giant was lifted off his feet, a good portion of his sand blown away. It wasn't quite enough to expose his real body, but it was a good start. Naruto charged for an attack while Gaara was in midair, once again converting Kyuubi's chakra into wind element. He hit the sand body like a missile, plowing through the pressured sand. He got far inside before the sand started closing around him, threatening so squeeze the life out of him. He performed a kawarimi with a rock he prepared for this purpose before and then watched as the rest of his explosive tags stash blew up inside the monstrous sand body. Sand sprayed in all direction as the tanuki lost form. Gaara's body was thrown aside and landed with a snap near a boulder. Pain shot through him with an intensity he couldn't have even imagined before. He tried to move, but the torturous sensation intensified. He wanted to scream, but he started coughing up blood instead. Out of the corner of his eye he saw his opponent approaching rapidly. "No," he screamed before another coughing fit hit him. "I will not disappear." With sheer determination born out of fear, an entirely new experience. As well, he brought his hands together in a seal. "Playing possum," he shouted. Then his eyes closed and he slumped down in sleep. What the heck? Naruto thought. Did he just fall asleep in the middle of a battle? "Wake him up," the Kyuubi screamed urgently. Naruto wondered why, but assumed the demon knew what he was talking about and wasn't trying to pull a nasty prank on him. Before he could do so, the redhead's eyes snapped open again. They weren't green anymore, instead they were yellow with a strange diamond pattern in place of pupils. "I'm free. I'm finally free." Bwahahahahahaha, the Suna boy cackled madly and the blonde realized he was talking to Shikaku himself. "Crap," he thought. "You said I should wake him up," he asked the Kyuubi, but didn't get an answer. Sand started to swirl around the wounded boy, quickly reforming the giant body of the one-tailed tanuki once again. "I don't think so," Naruto narrowed his eyes and charged. The nine-tailed demon was pushing even more of his chakra into his system. It was burning through him, burning so much. He shot through the sand around the human body and started tearing at the protective cocoon that immediately surrounded him. He concentrated on sharpening the chakra again. Shikaku's tail tried to bat him away, but he countered it with his own. When did it appear? He had no time to wonder, but he put it to good use. He struck with it the same spot he had been tearing with his claws. There was more power in his tail. It broke through the molten shell and connected with the body inside. "No!" shouted Shikaku. It felt its control on its host slipping, but he wasn't giving up so easily. He gathered all his strength into one last attack. The sand formed into one gigantic spear. It shot forward at great speed, hitting the Kyubi Jinchuriki point blank. He had only time to cross his arms in front of himself before the sand slammed into him, throwing him high into the air. Somewhere in Tsunabaki was running through the streets of Sunagakure as fast as his legs would carry him. All around him the citizens were panicking. He didn't hold it against them. He was on the verge of panic himself. But then, who wouldn't be if they felt the power of Shikaku being released so close to them? Every one of them had some knowledge of the demon's power. Most of them had seen mangled bodies and sprayed blood on the streets, some witnessed such acts themselves. Gaara was dangerous even at his calmest, if there was a way to tell when he was calm, and lately he had been agitated. Baki saw it himself when he interrupted his encounter with the Leaf team. He had no idea what had sprung Gaara's interest in the youngest boy, but it must have been something big. He pitied the child when he saw it. He was dead and he didn't know it yet. Nobody could defeat Gaara, not in the middle of desert, where an endless supply of sand waited on his beck and call. He still couldn't fathom what could have brought on such a reaction. Gaara's kills had always been swift and brutal, one attack with sand, one squeeze, and it was all over. Some people attempted to fight, but the ever-present sand trapped them quickly. Most Jounin couldn't stand against Gaara, and that was when he wasn't using Shikaku. When he was, everything around was crushed. But now an obviously prolonged battle was taking place and the Ichibi's power was palpable in the air for quite some time. And it felt even worse than he remembered. What's going on, he wondered. Did Gaara release Shikaku? Had the demon broken free on its own and is coming to kill us all? He reached the training ground reserved for the Konoha Chunin exams participants. There was a large pool of molten glass slowly cooling down. His eyes widened in surprise. This wasn't Gaara's work. What could have caused it? Did Gaara finally meet an equal opponent? Such thought was just plain scary. He noticed movement out of the corner of his eye. He turned to the newcomer. It was the Leaf Jounin who commanded the unlucky squad. Did he come to save his charge? How did he know where to come? Baki had no idea, but it didn't matter now. What mattered was finding Gaara and stopping him if possible. He held no delusions about his own ability, but he was obliged to try. Gaara was his responsibility after all. Then the demonic power spiked. The Sand Jounin stopped dead in his tracks. "Oh no," ran through his mind. Now the Ichibi was truly out. He noticed the Konoha ninja, he couldn't recall his name, whisper something and speed towards the source of the ominous power. He's going to die, Baki thought. We're all going to die, followed shortly. He was scared out of his mind, yet nothing seemed to matter anymore. It can't get any worse. He watched the other man's back as he rushed to his certain doom. Is he so stupid or so brave, he wondered. Then he decided it didn't really matter and that he looked like a coward just standing there when he should be doing something to stop the monster. He didn't want to die a coward. He rushed after the Konoha shinobi. They climbed up the cliff's wall at top speed. The demonic power seemed less oppressive as they neared its source. Am I getting used to it, or is it really fading? Did Gaara win already, and is the Shikaku retreating back into the seal? Then he reached the top of the plateau and stopped on the spot, staring dumbstruck at the sight in front of him. Up the plateau Naruto landed on the hard stone ground with a crash and rolled for a good distance. He idly wondered why he felt no pain. He was certain this was supposed to hurt like hell, yet all he felt was numbness. Maybe the burning of the Kyuubi's chakra desensitized him for pain. He got to his feet, even though it gave him some trouble. He looked at his opponent. The redhead was lying on the ground, the half-formed body of Shikaku disintegrating around him. It appeared he was down for the count, but Naruto wasn't taking any chances. He ran to him again. He stopped just next to him. The Suna Jinchuriki was lying on the ground unmoving, blood covering his torso. The blonde was unable to tell how serious the damage was. Gaara's teal eyes were wide open, staring at something in the empty sky. "No," he whispered. "I cannot die here, I cannot die here." Naruto's rage was quickly leaving him. He couldn't feel anything but pity for the broken child in front of him. "I won't kill you," he said, "but you must not touch any of my friends ever again, understood? I can't die here. I can't die here," Gaara repeated like a broken record. It didn't seem he had even heard what the Konoha genin just said to him. Naruto sighed. He felt suddenly very tired. His whole body was in pain. "Naruto," someone shouted. He turned and recognized his guardian. "Tenzo," he smiled weakly. Everything was going to be okay now. Baki couldn't believe his eyes when he reached the top of the plateau. There was Gaara, the demon Gaara, the strong, unbeatable killing machine, lying on the ground, broken and defeated. If somebody asked him yesterday or an hour or just a minute ago, he would have laughed and brushed off such notion as ridiculous. Yet here he saw it with his own two eyes. The terror of the sand village was slumped on the ground, covered in his own blood, staring at nothing in particular and whispering like a madman, though that itself was nothing new. The short-leaf genin was standing above him, his eyes red and slitted, the marks on his cheeks more pronounced than he remembered, nails turned into claws, while red chakra surrounding him in a shape resembling some animal, one transparent red tail swinging behind him. Another Jinchuriki, the Suna Jounin realized. And strong enough to beat Gaara in his own sandpit. Fear settled down inside the pit of his stomach. He knew that Gaara held the weakest of the 9 Bijou, but he had been created with maximum effectivity in mind. Even a small portion of Shikaku's power brought about massive destruction. It was speculated that Gaara should be able to take on vessels of more powerful demons, but obviously it wasn't true. "Calm down, Naruto, he's had enough," the Leaf Jounin said. The Konoha Jinchuriki looked first at the downed Gaara, then at his teacher and slowly nodded. The putrid red chakra started slowly receding. First the tail disappeared, then the shroud around his body. Claws turned back into nails, the whiskers on his face thinned and his eyes turned back to blue. Then the boy fell to his knees, leaned on one arm and started shaking. His sensei knelt next to him and hugged him. Something about the scene disturbed Baki. He couldn't imagine anyone ever embracing Gaara. It was just impossible. He wondered what he should do now. What was the Kazekage going to do when he learned of this? What to do about a strong foreign Jinchuriki in their village? The demon vessel seemed down for the time being, he could take it out now, but there was still a Jounin of unknown ability between them. And he didn't even want to imagine what the Hokage would do when he learned about it. It would be the end of their alliance with Hidden Leaf and would get them into a lot of trouble. No one would want to deal with the village that killed the participants of their Chunin exams. And speaking of the exams, should someone like him be allowed at all? Why was he even thinking about it? That was the Kazekage's problem. He went to check on Gaara. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. Guys, make sure to help the author by visiting the link in the description. This is Fox Sage, and I'm signing off.